She had always believed humans were fragile creatures, small, bipedal, and lacking the natural armor or claws her people carried from birth. They were newcomers to the Galactic Council, known more for their wild stories and impossible optimism than any true strength. As an officer of the elite Varkari vanguard, she viewed humans as logistical support at best. They might cheer from the sidelines, but they would never hold a line under real fire. Yet there he was, the human sergeant assigned to her battalion, walking calmly through the drop-ship corridor as they prepared to land on Tarvek 9. She barely glanced at him when he introduced himself as James, too busy checking her plasma rifle and barking orders. They were to secure the southern ridge, a volcanic plateau turned into a bottleneck for enemy forces. Intelligence claimed minimal resistance, but before the first tremors hit, she felt something wrong in her gut. The drop pods landed into chaos. Enemy artillery opened fire moments before their shields could anchor. Craters swallowed entire platoons, lava vents exploded, and the ground cracked beneath them. She screamed commands through the comms, but her soldiers faltered, paralyzed by the sudden destruction. In those first moments, she saw her people, proud and disciplined, crumble. That was when she saw him. James ran straight into the impact zone. While her soldiers scattered or froze, he charged forward, lifting a Varkari trooper nearly twice his size over his shoulder. Then another, dragging them to a broken trench. He ignored the burning debris and shrapnel slashing across his armor. Each time he disappeared into the haze, she thought it was the last time, but he always came back, carrying someone else. Her mind refused to accept it. No one could do that, not a human. But there he was, moving faster and farther than any of her strongest warriors, his arms trembling but never failing. One moment, she saw him drop a wounded medic into cover, then turn and sprint back toward the flames. He roared orders at her soldiers, her proud, once arrogant warriors, and they obeyed. She felt something inside her break when she saw one of her lieutenants try to crawl away from the fight, only to be pulled back to safety by James. He shouted into the soldier's face. She couldn't hear the words over the bombardment, but the lieutenant rose as if a new fire burned inside him. Her battalion had come to rescue the colony and hold the ridge, but it was James who rescued them. The sky turned crimson as artillery shells fell. She felt the ground heave, throwing her to her knees. Her exosuit servos screamed as she tried to stand. Her helmet flickered with warnings, structural failure imminent. Around her, a dozen Varkari warriors lay trapped under debris. They reached for her, but she was frozen. She could have fled. Her emergency thrusters still worked. Every instinct screamed to preserve herself, to lead from safety. Then he appeared again, ash and blood streaked across his face, armor dented and sparking. James pointed at her as if to say, "Move." Then he began lifting her soldiers one by one. When he reached the first trapped trooper, he wedged his shoulder under a massive rock and heaved. It should have been impossible, but James screamed, a primal roar that rose above the chaos, and the rock cracked aside. He dragged the soldier free, then another. She finally found her feet and rushed forward to help, but James shoved her aside and signaled for her to guard the escape corridor. Without thinking, she obeyed. Minutes felt like hours. When the final shell slammed into the ridge, she thought they were all dead. But through the haze, she saw James crawling, dragging 3 more soldiers behind him. She ran forward, grabbed one, and together they stumbled to the last evacuation shuttle. Inside, she counted heads. She kept expecting gaps, but every face was there. Even the lieutenant who had once tried to flee now clutched James's arm like a lifeline. She realized in a rush of tears that they had all survived. The shuttle engines roared, lifting them off the molten surface. As they rose, she looked back at the ruin below, and then at James, who slumped against the wall, barely conscious. She knelt beside him, her armored hands trembling. "Why?" she finally asked, her voice hoarse. His cracked lips curved in a faint smile. "No one gets left behind," he murmured. She had mocked them, doubted them, dismissed them as weak. Yet this one human, fragile in form, indomitable in spirit, had carried her entire battalion to safety. In the days that followed, as they regrouped on a distant moon, she watched James heal slowly. Scars crisscrossed his back and arms like war medals. Her soldiers, once obsessed with individual glory, now gathered around him for guidance and comfort. They began to practice the carry drills he taught them. They sang his old human marching chants in their guttural language, voices rumbling like distant thunder. The story of the human who had carried an entire battalion spread through their people like wildfire. He became a living legend, not for superior technology or brute power, but for something deeper and more enduring. One dawn, she stood before him, her hand pressed to her chest in the deepest salute of her kind. "We will follow you," she said. James chuckled softly and shook his head. "No," he said, looking at her and then at the horizon. "I just showed you how to carry each other. Now you lead yourselves." In that moment, she understood. Strength wasn't just about muscle or armor. It was about heart, about refusing to give up on one another. That was what humans brought to the stars. Where once they called humans weak, they now saw them as the strongest warriors of all. She had thought humans were weak, until one carried her entire battalion to safety and taught them all a new meaning of courage and unity.